Hey, it's me, Shannon, and this is part 19 of Was I in a Cult? So, in the last episode, I talked about how I received some information from my friend Sarah that was making me question some of the things about the church I was attending. The last thing I wanted to be was in a church that was producing or somehow being a part of any type of false doctrine. I didn't really know who to talk to about this situation that I was having in my own church, and I was kind of concerned that they were just going to be upset with me for actually going to another church or talking to someone outside of our church. And the fact that I was scared to go talk to someone in my own church because I was afraid that they were going to get mad at me for going to a different church and talking to someone outside of our church is crazy and a very red flag that I could potentially be in a cult. I was originally going to go talk to Sandra because she was my direct leader, but because of that little blow up that we had before, I didn't really feel comfortable because I thought that she was going to already like give me the third degree and be like, well, why were you going to another church? And why were you talking to someone outside of the church? And why were you even having this discussion? And I'm just like, I didn't want to get gaslighted. I didn't know that was the term at the time, but she was very good at that. So I didn't want that. And I decided to go to someone else that I felt was more like gentle, I guess. And so my friend Pam, who wasn't like my leader, but she was a leader within the church that I sort of went to and talked to from time to time, and I felt like she was a little bit more understanding. So, because I had had situations in the past that I discussed with her, and I remember she was just like a gentle soul more so than my other leader. I mean, Pam wasn't like the fly off the handle type A type personality like Sandra was, so I felt a little bit more at ease with her. She always seemed to approach everything with like compassion, and like she would listen more than the other one would just kind of yell at me and tell me what she thought was right, you know, according to her opinion. Anyways, so with Pam, I told her, and I remember her just telling me something like, well, how do you feel? Like, how do you feel when you come to this church as opposed to when you went to the other church? And so I told her, honestly, when I went to the other church, I kind of felt a little out of it because I didn't, it was like my first time there. And I probably felt that same thing when I first came here. And she was like, okay, so what did you think about like the message and stuff and like the worship and all the things within the church? And I was like, well, I really liked how they shared the word and stuff. Like, it was just like really calm, like compared to our church, is what I told her. And she was like, what do you mean by that? And I was like, well, here, like they're always like yelling, and the preaching is like, la, 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 like on fire, And I'm like, and there they were just like, so let's turn to Matthew chapter 4, And it was very calm and mellow. And I'm like, I'm not sure if I like that because I'm so used to being like yelled at, basically. And I don't think I said that when I was talking to her, but now that's the way I'm thinking of it now, is that it was like the opposite of being like yelled at or talked to in a calm voice. That was the main difference. And I was so used to being yelled at and preached at like in a way that now I look back was sort of verbally abusive. But that's what I was used to, and that's all I knew. Like, I was used to them saying, if you're not coming to church every week, then you're not committed and you're not faithful. You don't have the cause and you don't have the vision. And, like, that's what I was used to, as opposed to in Matthew 14:20, they talk about this, and, this is how you can apply this to your life. And it was just it was a different style of preaching that I wasn't used to. And the same thing with the worship. The worship that we had, I will say that the worship that we had in our church was absolutely amazing, and um, I really enjoyed it. And when I went to go to worship in like the other church, I didn't know the words to any of the songs, and they were like a different style, like I don't know, and I was just I preferred the worship at my church. Um, and she's like, so where do you feel like you fit more? Like, where do you feel like you belong? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I just want to make sure that I'm in a place that's giving me like sound doctrine. And she's like, okay, so let me just tell you something. She's like, so a lot of times you're going to hear things that you might not agree with, or you're going to hear scripture and someone might take it out of context, because we're all human and we all make mistakes. So what you have to do is think of it as a watermelon. And so you like have this watermelon, right? And the watermelon's really good, but there's a lot of seeds in that watermelon, right? So you have to pick the seeds out and throw the seeds away, right? And then you enjoy the watermelon. So she gave me that little scenario and was like, that's what you have to do in the church. So if someone says something or does something in a way that you don't, that like rubs you wrong, you don't like it, you just spit it out. And then so you take the good and you spit out the bad. And that's how I was given an example of what I should do. And like that made sense to me. I was like, yeah, we're all human, we all make mistakes. She's like, as far as different preachers coming here to our church, like, you know, people are human and people make mistakes and they might not always say the right thing. So I was like, okay. And so she kind of like convinced me in a very loving way, but I also feel like it was manipulative at the same time. Like, because she went into like, how do you feel? And she let me bring up my feelings and what I felt when I was in the church, as opposed to like thinking like critically about what I was hearing and what I was seeing and what was happening within the church. I think I went to church with my friend Sarah for maybe a couple more times, and then I went back to our church, and I don't know, I ended up making the decision to stay. So like the watermelon analogy that they use many times when they don't really want to own up to their mistakes is something that will be effective. I mean, it's effective when you tell someone that, because then you realize, yeah, we're all human, we're all imperfect. So there's never a perfect church. You're never going to find a perfect doctrine. And, so therefore, you should just stay where you're called, basically. And so that's how I think I took things after that. It was like, okay, well, I don't think what he said was very nice, so I'm just going to take that little seed and like throw it out and just pretend it didn't happen. I mean, she did all that with assuring me that, we had a sound doctrine, that our basic belief system was truth, and that, sometimes different people, they perceive things differently. So I just have to remember how I perceive these things and move forward. So that's kind of how I ended up staying in this church for the next 12 years. I had to spit out a lot of seeds, just saying. Sometimes I think I had to throw up the whole watermelon. They did fail to mention that a little corruption corrupts the whole church. And by the way, I never found that watermelon analogy in the Bible. In fact, in the Bible, I found that I was supposed to abstain from even the appearance of evil, not just spit it out and pretend that everything is okay when it's not.